Thanks for tuning in. Hold on 1 second. Okay. We are back in the Homestead Supply Room. And we are once again talking about maple syrup. Making maple syrup. On the homestead, at wherever you live, at your house, if you have maple trees, you want a little project for the kids, whatever you need, whatever you want, we'll talk about it. Okay. So first off, thanks for tuning in. Again, if you would like to know even more about making maple syrup, go back to my channel videos. I'm doing a whole series of maple syrup making, essentially for the average Joe at home who just has some maple trees and wants to make his own maple syrup. I know there's people left out there in the world like me who want to do that. Last year I made about 3 gallons here for the house. Boiled about 105 gallons total of sap. My sap runs at 2% sugar, which is pretty standard. I do have mostly red maple and a Norway maple. If you have questions about tapping maple trees, which tree to tap and which tree not to tap, you can essentially tap all maple trees, except for a Japanese maple. You may have a Crimson King, which is essentially a Norway maple variety. You can tap those. You can tap sugar maple, red maple, silver maple, and Freeman maple. And there's one out there called Autumn Blaze, which I believe is the same thing as a Freeman maple. So get to know your trees, do your research, and mark your trees and know your trees during the summer, and mark them before the leaves fall in the fall. So you know which trees you're going to tap, especially if you have like a small woods or something like that. If you can't tell the bark in the winter, mark your trees ahead of time. So my trees are pretty spread apart, and they produce a lot of sap because they're pretty much standalone in a nice area, and I don't have to worry too much about marking those. They're pretty noticeable. So go back and watch those videos, gain a little bit of knowledge, and let me know if you have any questions. I cover as much as I can, and I do the best I can, and I like talking about making maple syrup. So tonight, I wanted to essentially just quickly divulge into heat sources. So a heat source for the regular Joe at home, or even a small homestead, is one of the most challenging things to have. A proper heat source, especially for boiling sap. If you've already done some research and you've come to this video and you're saying, I got a turkey fryer, use your turkey fryer. So there's a couple things there. You can use the turkey fryer burner. You can use a camp stove, like a dual burner, like a 1, 2, or 3 camp stove high pressure burner. So 30,000 BTU burner or more is going to be good for boiling sap in a 22 gauge or 24 gauge stainless steel buffet pan. And if you go back and watch my Maple Supplies video, I go over the sap pan and most of the supplies I use at home. Just as reference, this year I'm putting out about 23 taps, which for one home is plenty of maple syrup for a year, possibly even 2 years depending on how much you use it. But if you get the right sugar content, it lasts indefinitely, and you can just keep using it. So, but heat source, okay? You have those burner options. You also have like a fire pit, okay? So a lot of people will get the fire pit going, and They will put the pans, their hotel pans, on top of the fire pit, arranged in a nice little way that they can start a fire under there. You also will see a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there's some people out there going out and buying cinder blocks and essentially creating a cinder block kind of makeshift maple syrup evaporator arch type of setup. It's essentially a campfire. It's essentially a fire pit, a long fire pit that has a little bit of stack ventilation to it, similar to what you would see in like a real sugar house anywhere in the maple producing states here in the U.S. So some things to consider. Okay, if you're small time, you're putting out a couple of buckets. If you use one hotel pan, one buffet pan on like a turkey fryer burner, that's going to be plenty for you. I average 13 gallons of sap per tap. So if you have 2 taps, that's about 26 gallons. You should get you should get about 4 pints out of that, 4.5 pints out of 2 taps. And if you guys use maple syrup a little bit here and there for the year, that would be perfect. And I wouldn't recommend going in too much, spending a lot of money on anything, and keeping it small. See how you like it before you start getting serious. So again, if you go watch my maple syrup supplies video, I'll talk, and my filtering video, I talk about filtering. So go back and watch that. So your turkey fryer is probably going to be your best friend if you're just small time, couple taps, yada yada. If you're putting out like, I would say 5 to 10 taps. If you have a dual burner camp stove, that's probably going to be the way to go for you. Get a couple of hotel pans. You spend the hotel pans are they might cost you $40 a piece. So that's $80, and it's just something to consider. If you're buying the hotel pans, I would probably say maybe you have more of an interest in doing it every year, which is good. So it's good to have hobbies, especially in the winter and there's not much to do. Maybe it's been a long winter, now spring's here, and you're waiting for summer. So now you got something to do, and you can make maple syrup. So some people want to put in a nice investment and get the stuff and have it every year, like me. Maple buckets behind me, aluminum. Some people buy the bags that you have to rebuy every year. Some people keep them and wash them out and all that stuff and dry them out, wherever. You can do that. I prefer the aluminum buckets over having to buy bags every year, potentially. And just, you buy it and you forget it, and you don't have any invest. It's a fixed cost. It'll pay for itself essentially over the course of a couple, 2-3 years. Couple 2-3 years, so that's something to think about with the buckets. All right, so some things to consider when it comes to heat source. The propane burner is going to be good. Essentially, if you have a place to use that, a lot of people use it in the garage, at the edge of the garage. You're covered. Okay, so if you're watching this video and you're thinking about making maple syrup over a fire pit or something like that, now where I live in northern Ohio, we do have rainy days in the spring. It's spring. So we will get rain in March. Most of my mapling is done in February. A lot of people do run through the whole month of March. So that's something to consider. If you're going to be using a fire pit or some kind of wood-fired source, and you don't have like a proper sugar shack to do that in, you don't really want to. It's not really that great of a time if you're out there trying to boil sap and it's raining into your pans and on you and on your fire and all that stuff. Something to consider. The propane investment, buying the propane, having your propane tank, filling the propane. You have to weigh what's best for you. Do you want to start a fire and get your sap boiling, but then for some unknown reason you have to leave the house, you have to leave the property, something's going on, somebody either needs help or you're in a situation now where you have to leave the homestead, the house or whatever, and you got a fire going. Now if you had propane, all you got to do is turn those propane burners off. So that's the main gist that you need to think about when you're thinking about a heat source for boiling your sap. I use propane for the simple reason of what I just explained. If something is going on, I can shut those burners off and go. Shut the burners off, shut the tank off, go. I boil with propane under my little sugar shack, which I did a tour. I have a sugar shack tour video. You can go back and watch that. But I can shut her down and go. So some things to weigh and think about. But it works out good for me. You're boiling sap for up to 10 hours a day if you have a good 22 gallon bunch of sap, and you find yourself in a situation you got to run down to the store because you forgot to stock chicken for dinner. Something that simple. Yeah. Any numerous reason. So, fire pit, propane camp burner. If you're the small-time producer like me, 3 gallons of syrup a year, to me the propane is going to be your best route. If you're if you're up to 50 taps and you're getting 50 times 13 gallons of sap per tap, now you're talking about a lot of sap. So then you might see yourself getting into a small wood-fired setup that you can gather all your sap for the week. You have 100 gallons to boil on a Saturday, or on a weekend, really. Even a barrel burner evaporator, homemade. You're going to spend whole weekend probably boiling off that 100 gallons, which is a good time. Don't get me wrong, but I'd do it tomorrow. I had no problem. I enjoy that process. I enjoy the process of making maple syrup, and you just got to weigh your pros and cons, pick your battles, that type of thing. So keep it smart, though. When you're starting out, don't spend a lot of money, and just ease your way into it. The filtering and the hydrometer and candy thermometer operation is your most important if you want your syrup to be correct sugar content, and stick it in the jar and it's good forever. So just a few thoughts. So heat source, you pick it, but maybe this put a bug in your ear on which way you should or should not go. So would appreciate any questions or comments you got. Give me a big thumbs up, giddy up if you can. That'd be great. Thanks for subscribing, for all you subscribers out there too, and hope to see you back on the next video. Thanks again for watching. This is Jeff from Jeff Outdoors.